Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, On-Demand Professional Learning. I'm Wayne DiOrio, Editor-in-Chief of Scholastic Administrator, and I'm happy to have three great educators with me today to help us dive into this topic and explain the changes that are coming to professional learning. Quite simply, I think that it's becoming a more of an on-demand Netflix-type model, if you will, where teachers and staff and administrators can look for smaller chunks in just-in-time professional development and also differentiate the professional development that various staff get in terms of what they need, kind of exactly when they need it. So I'm excited to dive in. Before we do, I have a couple of little housekeeping things I want to mention. There will be a Q&A at the end of the session, so pay attention to that on your screen. You could type in questions anytime, and we will see those. And one of our speakers is going to ask for some feedback as she's speaking, so be ready for that as well. That'll be great. You'll get an email. Anybody who registered for today's webinar will get an email in about 24 hours with a link that you could watch this on demand, which certainly fits our theme today. You could share it with staff if you'd like. And a PDF of the slides will be available as well afterwards, and you'll have instructions on how to download those slides if you so wish when you get that email. So without further ado, I want to jump in. Let me introduce all of our speakers, and then I'll hand it off to our first one. We're really happy today to have Cunningham-Morris of ASCD. We have Jason Flom, the Director of Cornerstone Learning Community School in Tallahassee, and Duncan Young of Scholastic Achievement Partners. Ann, are you ready?
I certainly am, Wayne. Thank you so much, and thanks to everybody today for taking your time to be with us. We know that this is the start of the school year for most folks, and that you're very busy, so taking time out for your own learning is also very important, and kudos to you for doing that, and we appreciate it. So I'd like to just get started by talking about the types of professional learning practices that ASCD really promotes and supports in the field with our work that really lead to personalization. The first thing I'd like to talk about is really the importance of blended professional learning and the blended professional learning approach as we move to more personalized professional learning. When you think about what we ask teachers to do with students, we ask them to do a variety of things to personalize. We ask them to take the blended approach, and we also ask for them to differentiate. And so it's no different with adults. We certainly want to have adults using the blended approach, and for most of us, what that means is that as leaders, we're going to be responsible for defining blended professional learning and making sure that everyone understands what it is and how it plays out in the schools in your district. So if you look at our definition, and I think this is generally the definition of blended professional learning, we know that certainly it's a combination of face-to-face in a variety of ways. We'll talk about those ways as we move forward. I think all three of us will be hitting on the variety of ways that face-to-face is delivered. Certainly the use of digital products, a variety of digital processes that many of you probably already have in place, and virtual interaction, which has become a really big way that many learners, adult learners, are engaging in their own professional learning. And so what I'd like for you to do now is really, since we've defined blended professional learning, and many of you are probably using some type of blended professional learning at this point, if you would click on the Q&A aspect of the tool here and just share the following things. If you're using blended professional learning practices, what are you using now in your district? What types of things are you doing? So maybe give an example. And then what successes are you having, and what challenges are you experiencing? And as you post, you can go now and post anything any answers to those questions in the Q&A section. And as you post, I'll certainly be taking a look, and we can think and talk about those things that you have shared as we move through. I think many districts are certainly dealing with successes, and many districts are having challenges because it's something new, especially for many of our teachers and leaders who might not have been exposed to a lot of the virtual tools at this point. So it's not unusual for us to be experiencing challenges, and it's certainly not unusual for us to be at the point where we're supporting our learners, our adult learners, as they begin to move forward in this area. So I'll consistently check the Q&A and certainly begin to incorporate what many of you may be saying in my responses as I go forward. So what are some things that we need to do to assure personalization and differentiation? Well, the first thing as a district instructional leader, which, you know, certainly in the past when I was a district instructional leader, focusing on developing professional learning plans is really important. And I know normally, you know, when we do this type of conversation with leaders in districts, you know, we find out that many folks have professional learning plans, but they might not include the blended approach. They might not include how are we going to provide blended professional learning, and how are we going to differentiate it, which is really important. We ask our teachers to differentiate instruction, and certainly as leaders, we need to be modeling differentiated professional learning. And we can model that through having differentiated blended professional learning plans, and through supporting differentiated professional learning at the school level. And so what does that kind of look like? How do we describe the different levels of differentiation? You see here that we kind of focus on 4 levels at ASCD when we're working in the field with ASCD's professional learning services. Level 1 is really where your learners are at the awareness or introductory stage of whatever the professional learning is focused on. And usually at that level, everyone's very excited. That's the time when folks say, you know, oh, this is really going to work. I'm looking forward to implementing the new standards, or I'm looking forward to implementing the use of mobile devices with my instruction, or whatever the focus is. And so you have a lot of excitement at that awareness or introductory level. And people are generally getting the beginning of the information that they need there. At level 2, you've got your teachers and leaders, adult learners, are really beginning to delve into developing a skill, developing the skill in the area that they are learning about. And that takes practice. And so this is the practice level and the practice stage, and this is the area where, you know, providing additional personalization, choice, different ways that teachers and leaders can access the professional learning is really important to make sure that skill development actually occurs. At level 3, this is what we have seen in the field, and research shows us that implementation is the most difficult aspect of new learning. As adults move forward with implementing new practices, they really become challenged at this implementation level. And what we find here is that traditional kind of old-fashioned, I'll use the dreaded term staff development, doesn't support teachers at the implementation stage, or leaders, any adult learners at the implementation stage, because at this stage you really do need to have follow-up that is ongoing, that is job embedded, that includes support, coaching along the way. And if you don't, what we find out is you get the implementation dip. And this is where our adult learners say, you know what, I tried it, it didn't work, I'm going back to my old way of doing business. Finally, level 4 is institutionalization of practice. And this is where we are supporting really the change process in becoming part of the culture of what we do every day in our district and in our schools. So whatever initiatives or content or professional learning you're putting forward, to have it institutionalized is where you really want to go. So as you're focusing on your differentiated professional learning plans, you need to make sure that you include, as a district leader, activities, evaluation, all the different professional learning aspects, job-embedded practices that support every level. So I'm going to ask you once more to share some practices in the Q&A section by going there and just share, one or two lines about how you are presently using your district professional learning plan to assure differentiated professional learning. If you could do that now, then we can move forward, and I certainly will be providing you some examples. But what we know is that as leaders, if we are including differentiated professional learning, which makes it much more personalized in our district professional learning plans, then it's much more likely to turn up in our school-based professional learning plans. So if we are supporting practices for job-embedded learning, if at the district level we have policies in place that support job-embedded learning for differentiation, then those things are more likely to happen. So some of the things that we can do as we move forward with professional learning plans are to make sure that we include some best practices as leaders, and this is crucial to our success. So here are some of the best practices that we know our professional learning plans need to include, our blended professional learning plans. Certainly, they've got to align with our strategic plan. They have to include professional learning evaluation up front before you start implementing the plan. You have to think about how will we know that what we're doing is successful. And at ASCD, we use Guskey's model of professional learning evaluation. And because I'm a student of Guskey, we've also added a level 6 with his permission to our 5 levels, to his 5 levels, which actually takes us to the sustainability point. So all of these areas should be included in your professional learning plans. So as we move forward with our support for schools and districts around the country and actually throughout the world, we focus on the use of blended professional learning and the use of that approach to assure customization and personalization. Now, what does that mean? It means that you've got to focus on building your local capacity and local expertise and personalizing using a variety of the blended approach, some of the things I've just talked about. So we certainly start out with initial and then ongoing needs assessments along the way. That's part of that professional learning evaluation that I talked about. If you don't start out knowing where folks are, where your adult learners are, then you can't personalize for them. You can't offer the choices. You can't provide the different ways that they can learn through both virtually and face-to-face. You can't provide them the different types of job-embedded activities and practices that need to happen in their learning communities or during their collaborative planning times or whatever if you don't know what their needs are and if you're not constantly monitoring those needs to determine how they're growing and where they still need support. So that's really important in our work in the field, and we do that at the district level and then move forward with helping district leaders do that at the school level. We also support district leaders in implementation and professional learning evaluation planning, as I talked about earlier, which is a big part of connecting with your overall plans. And then finally, really supporting with making connections with initiatives. One of the things I talked about earlier or alluded to is that we can't move forward if we have initiative fatigue. So if we have so many things going on and we haven't figured out how to portray them and roll them out to teachers and leaders so that they see the connections in everything we're doing. And there are many connections in just about everything we're doing in education. But pointing those things out really helps. And so we support leaders with making those connections, with helping them develop a communication plan that can actually show how they will move forward with continuing the professional learning and assuring that best practices such as the job embedded and the use of blended professional learning are actually occurring. Additionally, some of the other things that we promote, support, help with through everything that ASCD does, but especially with our professional learning services support in the field, is by building that local capacity. And we help to build local experts over time, both at the district and the school level. So working with instructional leaders at the district level, school-based leaders at the school level, which includes administrators and teacher leaders, and really focusing a lot on the teacher leadership piece to assure that local expertise is built and is sustainable. So if we're working with a district in implementing the new standards or use of a specific curriculum development approach or tool, maybe something like understanding by design or something else, then we would certainly work with those folks at the district and the school level to assure that not only did they learn the content of the professional learning, but also how to lead the learning in their schools and districts in a job-embedded way. So learning those job-embedded practices, how do we really make learning communities work, all of that is part of our support. We do use our ASCD faculty experts and our ASCD resources to move that forward. Our experts are people that have been selected by either our authors or others at ASCD who are our ASCD faculty members, and they work in the field exclusively with districts and schools in areas that are needed to develop that capacity. So the goal of our folks is not to always be the expert, but to share that expertise and impart that expertise to the local folks so that you can build your own experts over time, and our job is to go away. We do that not only through our ASCD faculty, but also through the resources that we have, including our digital resources, which I'm going to talk a bit about in a minute, as well as our virtual professional learning job-embedded experiences, including virtual coaching that we offer, and a variety of other experiences that we make sure are included in what we do. As we move forward with this learning, we often hear about flipped learning in the classroom. Well, flipped professional learning is also quite effective. So we use flipped professional learning using ASCD's digital products. As I said, we use virtual coaching, application, assignments in between face-to-face, assignment in between virtual support, providing a variety of learning opportunities concurrently so that different teachers and leaders' needs are met is very important to the professional learning services that we provide. And finally, varying the learning preferences, providing professional learning to teams, to small groups, individuals, both virtually and face-to-face as a delivery model is really important to the way that we know adults learn and to the success that ASCD has had with professional learning services. One of the tools we use is ASCD's PD in Focus, and the URL is there for you to go to. This is a digital tool, and it allows you to use a variety of channels and a variety of content in an integrated, job-embedded way, so that you are able to assign work to your adult learners as part of what they do in their regular school day. Maybe it's part of the professional learning community work that they're able to go in and select specific channels or be assigned specific channels related to the content that you're focused on for your professional learning. Additionally, this tool allows schools and districts to customize channels and to create custom channels based on what your needs are. And so a big focus of our digital tools as well as our face-to-face is really to promote customized, personalized professional learning along the way, that not only can you do as a team, such as PD in Focus, so that everybody's on the same page and collaborating, but also you can provide things that teachers can do individually as well, either through PD in Focus or through our other digital tool, PD Online. So ASCD has a variety of approaches that are focused on 21st century professional learning that move your district and your adult learners towards a more personalized way of learning, and certainly a more job-embedded professional learning approach. If you certainly want more information, we have that information here for you online, so that you can contact us for additional information, or if you want to learn more about our professional learning services, or certainly any of our digital tools or virtual coaching, certainly give us a call. As you know, ASCD is a membership organization that's always been there for district leaders to support you and help you in what you do. So with that, I'd like to turn this over, actually, to Jason Flom, who is one of our ASCD faculty members. And Jason's areas of expertise are really to focus on excellent professional learning at the school level, focusing on teacher leader development, and really how do we support teacher leaders in their development and make sure that they have what they need in order to move forward. And certainly he is also an expert in integrating technology and professional learning. So Jason, take it away.
Thanks so much, Ann, and thank you all for being here. We're in pre-planning week, and I'm the director of a school here in Tallahassee, Florida, and so we are in full tilt mode, as I imagine many of you are. So what we're going to be talking about today is looking at moving from professional development to professional learning. And so this is a slide that co-faculty member Pete Hall shared with us, and so I'm going to put these phrases up, and I want you to think about them in terms of true or false. I think you're going to find that they're pretty simple given your experience base. So think about it. True or false? Now my guess is that you look at these and say, wow, that's obvious. These are all absolutely false. And so here's the challenge, is if we change just one word in this slide, will it change whether or not it's true or false? No, it's acting funny. Okay, there we go. And my guess is when you look at all these phrases that we would have for children and our student learners and apply the adult learners, it makes it clear that adult learners are not all the same. And to kind of bring that out, one of the things that I do with our teacher leaders that we're training and our team facilitators, as well as our new faculty when we're onboarding, is to, it's moving on. There we go. is to think about a time in your life when your learning curve was off the chart. So think about a time when you were experiencing a powerful learning experience. And it doesn't have to be in a school setting, doesn't have to be grad school, although that's often noted, or when you were in middle school. But think about a time when you were in a powerful learning experience. And it's not always positive. It could have been a time when, maybe a family member was sick, or you had to care for, you became a caregiver of one of your parents. So sometime when you were just deeply embedded in learning. And if you want, if you're so inclined, you can click on the Q&A and put the you can put your experience in the question box, and I'd love to read them. And then think, what were the essential building blocks of that experience? So if you were to take any one of those powerful learning experiences, and for me it was during the years that I worked for Outward Bound in North Carolina, and the kind of learning that happened there when you're trying to keep kids safe in the wilderness. And when we think about those types of experiences, what are the building blocks? What are the qualities that make it for a powerful learning? I've done this with a number of different audiences and teachers and leaders, and oftentimes they come up with a list similar to this. This was our new faculty last week. This is the list that they came up with. Is that these powerful learning experiences there was novel, there was an internal motivation often there was a struggle and some adversity. There was oftentimes a guide or an expert or a mentor, someone who just kind of provided that background support that enabled them to be empowered as learners. Usually there's some sort of reflective phase. Sometimes the powerful learning you get in retrospect, and that there's maybe a goal and maybe often a shared goal. And always these powerful learning experiences are engaging. So then the question I ask, is it possible to design for and also sustain this type of transformational and powerful personalized learning for adult learners in schools? And then if so, and my hypothesis is yes, but then what does that look like? What does it look like if the powerful learning, what am I doing? I'm messing up here somehow. So that brings us to this idea of professional development versus professional learning and the differences therein. So if we look at the two, professional development is often top-down. The goals and the problems are generated in some place far away, sometimes Washington, sometimes our state capitals, sometimes our school boards, but they're not generated locally. But in professional learning, those goals are generated locally, and so there's some of that ownership that comes on board that can help to facilitate learning in the same way that when we're working with students, when they have ownership, they're more engaged. And then professional development implies something that one does to someone else. I'm developing this, as opposed to professional learning, which implies something one does with others or self, and that there's an expert focus versus a learner focus. And PD often is hierarchical, whereas professional learning practices are often participatory leadership, where there's a number of shared opportunities for leadership within a group, within a cohort, within a larger organizational model. So with this in mind, I'm going to offer you 6 simple steps to cultivating effective and personalized professional learning communities. And I put simple in quotes there because these things are much easier said than they are done. It's really about the vision of the leaders in the organization, in the school, in the district, and how they begin to cultivate and empower the learners that they work with, the adult learners as well as the student learners. First up, thinking about this initial piece of becoming aware is learning about effective PLC practices. So, and at the core of any and all professional learning community practices is building and sustaining trust. And this we know from brain research, right? That if students don't feel safe, if they're feeling emotional, or if they're feeling like they're not comfortable in a place, then their amygdala is fired up. The information isn't getting to their prefrontal cortex where they can really reason and think about things. And adult learners are exactly the same. If they don't feel safe, if they don't feel trusted, if they don't feel that it matters to them, then learning is going to be stunted, or ineffective at best. So at the heart of all effective PLC training practices is building and sustaining trust. And then some structures that will help to process that deeper learning might include instructional rounds, lesson study, using protocols, and critical friends groups, some of which some of you might already be using. And then some four main pillars of practice, which in looking at the Q&A that a lot of you have put in, many of you are already using some of these, is teaming. And that could be everywhere from having a pair of educators or leaders working together to investigate something, to providing leadership roles for teachers where they're able to grow as professionals and then also inspire others. Collegial inquiry, where you might have a group or a cohort that are looking at essential practices, and maybe they're going to a flipped professional learning model where they're investigating something, so they go off and they're learning about it and then coming back and working together to implement and constantly reflecting on it and having that collegial inquiry cycle. And then also having mentoring, which I'm sure many of you already have in your districts and your school, where you're beginning to onboard other leaders and new staff into the type of learning practices that you're using in your program. So, and then there's three main ideas, and this comes from Richard Dufour from ASCD's Educational Leadership magazine from a couple years ago. And the three big ideas he really focuses on and are key to any effective PLC practice is that this has to be student-focused. All the learning that we do as professionals have to come back to that core question of what is it that our students need us to learn, and how do we know that we've learned it, but it's in the students. Creating that culture of collaboration and real collaboration where people are really working together on authentic tasks that make a difference. And then always pertaining to that key piece of and then the results, and the results being the student learning that happens in our schools. So the second piece is to assess the current landscape of learning that's happening. And when I work to do this, there are two essential questions that we ask, is what types of learning are happening now in your school, in your district, in the classrooms, and then what do our students need us to learn? What do they need? And so to get at these two assessment pieces, I begin with looking at inviting other stakeholders, inviting educators, inviting other leaders in the school and in the district to come together so that everyone has a voice in trying to uncover the gaps, because it's the gaps, if we can learn to close the gaps that happen in our systems, that's where we find the power. So the three types of learning, some interesting bullets there. Three types of learning that we often find in schools, and this is based on the work of Robert Keegan, who is, sort of guy, and Ellie Drago-Severson has followed up on his work and worked closely with him. And instrumental is the type of learning where if you come into a new school and you've got to learn the curriculum and how it works and how to implement everyday math, say, in the fourth grade classroom, then that's an instrumental learning. That's the concrete practices that happen within a single classroom. Socializing learning is when you might have a team of fourth grade teachers looking at their practices of everyday math and learning from one another in learning communities. And then self-authoring knowing is the type of self-authoring learning is when they're asking the most difficult questions and presenting like disconfirming data that goes against the norm or what you think, and exposing and exploring fundamental assumptions. This is the type of learning that tackles the most complex problems, equity, unexamined practices, the hidden curriculum of schools. And this type of learning rarely happens on accident because it can be the most challenging and it can be really hard for folks to get there. But it's a really powerful way of transforming schools and transforming the learning ecosystem of our schools. And then in thinking about our student needs, the goal is to understand their work samples, portfolios over time, not just data, but really work samples of stuff when they're really struggling through an idea or a concept. And then in observations, oftentimes we focus on teachers, but I encourage folks to instead focus on students in this assessment phase, is to really understand how the students are interacting with schools so we can really understand what it is that they need us to learn. So what are the student experiences in schools? And then, of course, looking at the data, the formative and summative data that we're always keen on keeping an eye on. And then the third piece is then to begin to build leadership capacity. So this is in looking at the landscape of leaders or potential leaders within your organization and within your school, and figuring out ways to help build their skills in facilitative leadership and understanding constructivist developmental theory as it applies to adult learners, because we're all constructing knowledge in the same way that we think about students constructing knowledge. We're still doing that as adults. It's just we have a more complex understanding of the world around us, but we're still pattern makers. And then understanding and engaging adult learning. What is adult learning? What does it look like? What are the best practices? And then also looking at collegial inquiry best practices, having study groups that are looking at practices that are happening within school and how do people work together. And then with leaders engaged with some of these skills and capacities, working with educators to develop norms where they have that. The norms help to create that trusting environment so that people can have some of the hard and challenging questions and conversations that can really help to transform learning and can really help to uncover assumptions in our practices and help to make practices public, establish goals. And this is really about having the educators help to establish the goals and to establish and to understand and identify the problems of practice that are pertinent to them in their classroom and in their schools so that they have that ownership. And then how do we go about unpacking and understanding and working through those problems, using protocols, and then making sure that there's always time for reflecting on practice and giving educators access to e-learning opportunities or, flipped professional learning, things that can allow them to go off campus and learn as well and then bring back with their groups that they're working in. And then for continuing to engage educators, they need time. As we all know, time is of the essence. And again, that trust. They have to have trust. And so this is a place where I always think of, the Let It Go from Frozen, which I know everyone's tired of, and I'm a horrible singer, so I won't burden you with it. But letting it go, I work really hard to give teachers a lot of space to really grow as leaders. And it can be a little challenging sometimes, but it's really about trusting that they're going to be the learners that they are, and supporting and encouraging, and then giving constructive feedback as need be. Now, the fifth step is key to building on that learning over a sustained time, is to make sure that, again, we're going back to some of those student work samples, the things that are when the students are in the heart of struggling to learn. What are the things that they're producing then, and what does that tell us? What information can we garner from that? Understanding the student outcomes, and then also going back to look at those initial analysis of needs. Have we met those needs, or have we uncovered other more higher priority needs? And then also, as a leadership in this position, really thinking about, how do I take on an inquiry stance? How do I ask questions? And when things, how do I ask the right questions to get people to also then take an inquiry stance in their teams and in their cohorts, and then to really listen and really work for ways to refine the PLC. And then comparing notes with other leaders. And this is where some of the social networks really come into play and really can be really powerful, because if you have a chance to go into Twitter and look at the hashtag CP chat, those are connected principal chat, there's a lot of educators out there that are really doing some incredible practices, that are doing some flipped classroom, flipped leadership webinars, and can put you in touch with a lot of great resources. On ASCD Edge, there's a lot of community of practitioners who are working together to really understand practice at that leadership level, and who are trying to do this work. So really connecting with people who are going through some of the same things, and then always to assume the best of intentions, unless you have evidence otherwise. But for the most part, my experience has been that educators, the world around, want to do the best for the best number of people, and always keep the learner at heart. So I always try to lead with assuming the best. And then to repeat. and remembering that professional learning communities, while sometimes we get that pressure from the top to really focus on data, and this is about the structure and being very pragmatic about it, and certainly that's part of our role as leaders. In reality, professional learning communities are really about people. They're about the adult learners in our care, who are the people who are really, they're the rubber on the road. They're the ones who are nurturing students on a daily basis, and it's really important that we have a nurturing and trusting environment for them where they can feel empowered, so that that's what they are then creating in their classrooms, is that nurturing, trusting, supportive learning environment that empowers learners. So in learning communities, always coming back to that idea of people and how do we keep them safe. So some of the resources that can help you get started in some of these, Protocols for Professional Learning is from ASCD's PLC series. It's a great text that has a number of really powerful protocols for looking at student work, for looking at teacher practices, for doing observation and observational rounds, and ways of creating safe environment. Schools as Learning Communities is a ASCD educational leadership magazine. They did a whole series on learning communities. Building Teacher Capacity for Success by Peter Hall is a great book on how to make schools more reflective places, and some of those other resources. So for more information, as Ann shared, you can email programteam@ascd.org or give us a call. And I'd love to connect with any or all of you out on Twitter. You can find me at Jason Flom, or let's connect on ASCD Edge. And I'd like to hand it over now to Duncan to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Jason, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you're doing well. My name is Duncan Young. I'm a Senior Vice President with Scholastic Achievement Partners. And Scholastic Achievement Partners is the professional learning, consulting, and school change arm of Scholastic Education. So many of you are probably familiar with Scholastic. It's Clifford the Big Red Dog. It's Harry Potter. Many of you might be users of literacy programs like Read 180. What a lot of folks don't know is we're actually one of the leading professional learning organizations in the country. We're actually made up of three specific subgroups on our Scholastic Achievement Partners team. Literacy Solutions, we have an arm called Math Solutions, which is a professional learning organization founded by Marilyn Burns, a very well-known math educator, about 30 years ago. And then a third team called the International Center for Leadership and Education. So those of you who are familiar with Bill Daggett, Rigor Relevance, they're part of our team as well. So literacy, math, leadership, and really rigorous and relevant instruction for all students are our core areas of focus. So what I hope to do today is build off Ann and Jason's really excellent comments and share with you some of where I think we at Scholastic see the area of professional learning going. And I think one of the things you're going to note is that many of our observations are very, very similar to what Ann and Jason have laid out. I think the fact that you've got two organizations like ASCD and Scholastic Achievement Partners looking at the world of education, the world of professional learning in the same way means that there really is something very exciting taking place right now in terms of how we transform the way teacher learning and teacher instruction takes place. So we really look at the evolution of professional learning as having taken place over the last 20 years or so in three distinct phases. Professional learning version 1.0 is really marked by traditional sit-and-get compliance-based approaches. And if we look at the Joyce and Shower's data from 20 years ago at this point, it shows that type of approach really leads to very minimal gains in teacher knowledge and very minimal application to classroom practice. I think over the last 10 years or so, we've really seen what I would call professional learning version 2.0. This has really been the rise of job-embedded coaching, more of a focus on classroom application. But the big challenge at that point really has become sustainability, teacher ownership of the professional learning experience, as I think Jason really eloquently described in the last presentation. So that really brings us up to the crossroads that we're at right now, which is really what I would call professional learning 3.0. And let's examine some of the factors driving professional learning 3.0. Let's talk about some of the characteristics that we're going to see in this new model, and that many of you are probably likely seeing in your districts and schools right now. So what's driving the need for a new model of professional learning? I would say one of the main things is emergence and proliferation of digital tools and blended models. Vast numbers of companies are emerging with a wide range of digital tools, some really great digital content. we're seeing a number of states and districts requesting digital and blended professional learning solutions. Second, I'm sure many of you right now have in front of you one or more mobile devices. And I think this proliferation of mobile devices, the connectivity of teachers has fundamentally changed the way that teachers consume professional learning. It's really moved into more of a 24/7, anytime, anywhere type of model where professional learning does not have to now be bounded, by an in-service day or by the four walls of a school. Third, we're seeing greater teacher empowerment. Teachers are showing greater ownership of their own professional learning. They don't want professional learning to be something done to them. They really want to embrace and take greater ownership of their professional learning. And then finally, I think we're seeing, for those of you who are decision makers and control purchasing on the phone, my guess is that that you're being a lot more discerning with a lot of the spending that you're making and a lot of the investments that you're making in professional learning. I think there's been a lot of skepticism with existing professional learning models, and there's more of a demand on the part of decision makers across the country to really see more evidence of change from professional learning spending. There's an old quote from a retail wealthy named John Wanamaker who made a quote about marketing at one point, and he said, "I know that 50% of my marketing is working, but I can't tell you which 50%. And I think the same thing is true with professional learning. $5 billion every year is spent on professional learning in this country, and much of it is unaccountable. We know that maybe 50% is working, but we can't always say which 50%. So I think the rise of more of a data-driven model of professional learning is going to be a key characteristic of what we see come next. So Professional Learning 3.0, what is this new model going to look like? And here are some thoughts. It's going to be focused more on the individual needs of teachers. It's going to really reflect a refined understanding of adult learning best practices. It's going to focus not just on building knowledge, but it's going to focus more specifically on classroom application as well. It's going to focus for our purchasers and our decision makers on return on instructional investment, and data and showing evidence is going to be really important. And then finally, I think it's really going to need to to embrace teachers, it's really going to need to put the joy back in professional learning. I feel like so much of the joy and the passion has been sucked out of the professional learning experience for teachers over the past 10 or 15 years. The winning models that come next are going to need to find a way to put the joy back into the experience of learning more about your profession and refining your professional practice. So this is a quick framework that I wanted to share with some thoughts on what I'm referring to as a teacher-centric professional learning model. What are the 4 key components that are going to get us to that Professional Learning 3.0 vision? And all of you who are in charge of professional development in your schools or in your districts, these are 4 things that I'm hoping you can use as actionable next steps to take back to your schools and incorporate into your planning. So the first component, I'll go into each of these in detail, is a shared vision for great teaching. Second is great content that promotes really sound professional learning. Component 3 is a method or set of methods for progress monitoring and adaptivity. And then component 4 is teacher choice and voice. So let's explore each of those in detail. All right, so component 1 is a shared vision for great instruction. It's really hard to get teachers to improve their professional practice unless there is a shared vision about what great instruction actually looks like. And right now, perhaps unfortunately, the default for what great instruction looks like in a lot of places is being defined by the teacher evaluation frameworks around the country. It's being defined by Danielson. It's being defined by Marzano. Now, the challenge with that, a lot of those frameworks are very big, very unwieldy, and we believe that it's important that less is more in some ways, and that it's important when working with teachers to help them focus on fewer things and help them do them really well, and then use that as a foundation for further professional growth. Now, when we're really defining what great instruction looks like and working to build that common instructional vision within a school or district, there's 3 things that we want to look at. First, what do teachers all need to know? Second, what must they be able to do in the classroom? And the third, and most importantly, what student behaviors do we actually want to see? Because when we're in there actually looking at the quality of instruction, it's really better to look at what student behavior is as opposed to necessarily focusing exclusively on what the teacher's doing within the classroom. So here's some examples for how we really have worked at Scholastic Achievement Partners to define what great instruction looks like. Some of the coaching that we do is around effective implementation of instructional practices around literacy and scholastic literacy intervention programs like Read 180. This is an example of what we would call a competency map, where we've actually gone through and defined all of the knowledge and application elements or nodes that teachers need to understand in order to effectively implement this program and also demonstrate those literacy instructional skills that we know they need to be demonstrated to be effective in the classroom. And you see they're organized around domains that are aligned to these big instructional shifts going on right now. Classroom management, teaching with technology, reading comprehension, academic and vocabulary and discussion. And then the small elements around each of those colored circles really indicate those very specific knowledge and application nodes or elements that we're going to structure a really high-quality professional learning experience around. So a second example would be something that we call a collaborative instructional review. So this is a tool or a framework, a rubric that we use in working with teachers around the country to help them drive to higher levels of rigor, relevance, and learner engagement in the classroom. This is a digital tool that's actually used jointly by students along with instructional leaders. Both of them are working with one of our instructional coaches. And if you look at this example right here, there's really just three domains here: rigor, relevance, and learner engagement. Within rigor, we've got thoughtful work, high-level questioning, and academic discussion. And we're looking at the thoughtful work element right now. And then if you look down in the specific look fors that we have in this rubric, there's two elements. There's the student learning element, so what student behaviors are we really looking for to demonstrate thoughtful work within the classroom? And then what elements of good, sound instructional design and delivery are we looking for as well? So again, we want to have a simultaneous focus on both student learning and what the teacher is doing within the classroom as well. So both the Read 180 competency map and this collaborative instructional review are good examples of attempts to define a shared vision of what great instruction looks like, and attempt to provide a set of tools so that we can build that common vision and that everyone's kind of speaking the same language. So there's the old quote of beginning with the end in mind. If we as education leaders are not working with our teachers to begin with the end in mind and help communicate to them clearly and distinctly what success looks like in terms of instructional effectiveness, it's going to make it really, really hard to do any of the things that we want to do around personalization of professional learning. Let's skip a couple of slides here just in the interest of time and move on to the second component of our model for teacher-centric professional learning and personalization. So what I mean by great content is to support personalized professional learning, content really needs to have three characteristics. It needs to be modular. Okay, so in other words, it needs to be able to be chunked up and delivered in small chunks aligned to those elements of the competency map that you're going to develop around your vision for great instruction. It needs to be flexible, so it needs to be focused both on knowledge and application. And ideally, you want content that can work in multiple modes of delivery. You want it to be content that can be used as a way to facilitate a job-embedded coaching experience. But you also want it to be something that could be available to be delivered in an on-demand format as well. And then finally, of course, you want it to be research-based. You want it to reflect the very best research around adult learning. You know, one of the things that we also really believe and that we're focusing on right now is that video and the use of video for reflective practice and the use of video as a tool to facilitate really powerful coaching engagements between a coach and a teacher-learner is really going to be an important of the next model. So we call video the killer app of professional learning 3.0. And at Scholastic Achievement Partners, we've got a lot of great video that we use in our work. One of the teams that we really think highly of and that we use their resources a lot is the Teaching Channel. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Teaching Channel, this is a free resource out on the internet. There's about 400,000 different teachers that are members in the Teaching Channel community, and they've got a library of about 700 to 800 really, really high-quality, well-produced videos. We think really highly of them, and I wanted to encourage you to check out the Teaching Channel resources that are out there. I'm guessing that many of you on the phone are members of Teaching Channel and familiar with that resource. Okay, the third component of moving to a more personalized professional learning model is progress monitoring and adaptivity. Personalization means that we need to do an upfront needs assessment or a baseline understanding of where each teacher's individual starting point is, but we also need to have a great means to monitor teacher progress along the way and to be able to adapt the type of instruction that we're looking for. Anne laid out a really great, I think, 4-element model about how we might think where teachers are in that continuum of going from initial learning to application of practice within the classroom. And when we truly personalize professional learning, we've got to have those methods in place. So there's a couple ways to do this. If you've got job-embedded coaches, if you've got instructional coaches, and you work with an outside partner like Scholastic Achievement Partners or ASCD, your coach is essentially your means of differentiation. I think that's one of the really great things that coaches do. If you're using a technology-based system, you need to make sure that technology-based system has some type of algorithm or has some means of progress monitoring teachers via the online environment so it can adapt the type of content that they're getting. And the final bullet point here is that progress monitoring needs to actually go deep enough to address all preconditions for classroom application. Now, what do I mean by that? So to understand that, let's go to the next slide. When we actually look at professional learning effectiveness and we gather data around this, we actually go through and we try to look at 4 key elements about whether or not teachers are actually implementing what they've learned in the classroom. And so you've got to start with the very basic things. Number one, is the teacher willingly engaging in professional learning? Are they actually using the online tools you provided to them? Are they showing up for the professional learning session? Are they engaging with the coaches? Second, did the teacher actually find it effective and beneficial? Are you surveying your teachers to figure out whether or not they find their professional learning activities to be valuable and beneficial? Is there feedback that you can use to refine the model? Number 3, are they attempting to apply new strategies in the classroom? So when they're learning a new strategy, you've got to get past that initial fear of even going in and trying it in a real-world environment. So are you actually tracking strategy use? Are you getting in there, and are your instructional leaders in your building actually looking to see whether or not there are attempts to use new found strategies in the classroom? And then finally, do you actually have a system to show whether or not teachers are demonstrating progressive mastery of strategies in the classroom? So anytime any of you on the phone are implementing a professional learning initiative, I'd encourage you to go through and ask these 4 questions, and use these 4 questions as a way to structure a data gathering system and data gathering protocol, not for evaluation purposes, but to answer these basic questions about whether or not your professional learning efforts are making the difference that you want them to make. So here's an example of sometimes to answer that 4th question about whether or not you're getting progressive mastery, you've got to go and actually develop a rubric or an instrument to answer that question for you. This is an example of a project that we were working on at Scholastic Achievement Partners, where we were going in and focusing on building stronger instruction in 4 key areas: questioning strategies, use of graphic organizers, writing strategies, and test-taking strategies. And you can see that as part of the work, we actually developed a very, very simple rubric, again, not for evaluation purposes, but just for general progress monitoring purposes, to allow us to ask those questions and to communicate to school leadership whether or not we were actually making a difference and whether or not we could course correct. The kind of data that we're then presenting back to school and district leadership looks like this. Basically looking at, where were your teachers on average in the month of February? Here they were a 1.6 on a 4-point scale. And then where were they in May? They were, going up anywhere from a 2.3 to a 2.6 on a 4-point scale. And yes, there are issues with, the need to calibrate this instrument, and you've got to make sure that any coach or trainer using this instrument is well trained. But because we're aggregating the data, this data has really good gives us good directional indications about whether or not we're getting the progress that we need to get to. So the question that I would ask for all of you on the phone is, when you think about, you reflect on your professional learning activities in your schools and districts today, are you gathering this type of data, and are you able to pull this type of data to answer those basic questions about whether or not you're getting the results that you want to get? The final component of great personalized professional learning for teachers is teacher choice and voice. So whether coach, facilitator, or digital, teachers have to really own their professional learning and their professional growth. We're going to accomplish this through giving teachers both voice and choice. Voice is going to come from things like structured self-reflection, practices like a collaborative pre-meeting with the coach, and then choice is going to come from giving the teacher learner a say in actually what they learn. So anyone overseeing school or district-wide professional learning is going to know that there's a set usually of district or school-wide practices that you want all teachers demonstrating within the classroom. Maybe that's aligned to Danielson and Marzano. Maybe that's aligned to a district initiative. Maybe that's aligned to new higher standards that you might be transitioning to within your state. But a good rule of thumb is that you might want to focus 80% of the teacher's professional learning on those school and district-based goals, but then you might want to also focus about 20% on goals that the teacher is actually able to select for themselves. So maybe 80-20 is not the right proportion for you. I'd encourage you to try to find a balance between those two different objectives. So finally, when it comes to in-person versus digital, when we talk about the rise of technology, what actually best supports a professional learning model? And what I've attempted to do here is basically say that, when you look at those elements that I mentioned before, defined vision for great teaching, great content, progress monitoring, teacher choice and voice, and then when we also put in there cost effectiveness, because cost effectiveness is, of course, really important in this era of very tight budgets, you can see that both in-person delivered professional development and digital professional development have advantages. And so, to us, the conclusion, and I think you heard this, indicated by both Jason and Ann as well, is that I think the winning model here is really going to be a model of blended professional learning that starts with an upfront needs assessment, moves to a personalized professional learning plan for every teacher, and then engages every teacher in a rich cycle of learning that consists of online or in-person PLCs, some type of job-embedded coaching. I think that's a really, really important part of the model, and I think the research supports that. Feedback and reflection, some type of rewards, recognition, and benefits, and then, of course, rich online self-paced learning that teachers can engage in. And then down at the bottom, we, of course, want to make sure that we're defining data accountability metrics along the way. So, again, that was kind of a very quick tour through the evolving world of professional learning. If there's anything that I or anyone at Scholastic Achievement Partners can do to be of assistance, or if you'd like to learn anything else around blended professional learning, data-driven professional learning, or to talk about how to put some of these practices in place in your school, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is duyoung@scholastic.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Duncan Young. And I neglected to put our Scholastic Achievement Partners website on here, but it is www.scholasticachievementpartners, all one word, .com. And we'd be happy to engage with you and answer any follow-up questions that you might have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Duncan. This has been terrific. And I want to thank all our speakers today. Ann Cunningham-Morris, the Director of Professional Development from ASCD, Jason Flom, the Director-elect at Cornerstone Learning Community, and Duncan Young, the head of Scholastic Achievement Partners. I think that this was a really power-packed session. I think that there were a lot of good tips that you guys were able to give. I know I was sitting here taking notes. Communication, differentiated learning, blended, flipped were all words that I was writing down. So I'm glad that it all came together. I think that it really shows the trend that is happening out there for people. I apologize that we don't have enough time for Q&A today, but we do have the notes that you've sent us, so I will get back to people as I can. And we have your email addresses. And then just a couple words before we sign off. I want to let everyone know that you will be receiving an email to watch this on demand. I'll have a link that you can share it with peers or watch it again. And I know, like I said, there were a lot of resources shared. So you could also get a PDF of the slides. That will be available. And you'll get directions on how to do that in the same email that you get. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And again, thanks to our speakers. This was a terrific session.